a Dear Media original podcast.
The fact that I wanted to be known as the scientist who happens to be Black, it was more like, okay, I need to play by a specific set of paradigms and rules. And so once I kind of started learning a lot more from these other disciplines, I felt like, oh, wow, actually, I should bring my whole self into this work. And also, I should focus on, how not to harm my own community and how to actually think about benefiting my community. And that means completely removing the quote unquote view from nowhere, right? And going the opposite direction.
Timnit vocalized her desire to be a scientist before she even knew what a scientist was. She liked knowing how things worked, and she liked learning. Already at the top of her class and on her way to becoming the scientist she had dreamt of being, Timnit and her family were forced to flee Ethiopia. The identity she knew as a thriving, intelligent child with a bright future was erased. But Timnit remains committed to her education and finds a path to one of the best schools in the U.S. She excels and begins her journey as an engineer and scientist in a world dominated by white cisgendered men, tech and AI. The lack of equal representation in tech is pretty staggering and could be summed up by the title of a 2020 article published by CNBC. New reports show it could take 12 years to reach equal representation of women in tech. It's only 12 years if someone wants that change to happen. And that article only addresses the gender part. Finding reports and studies on intersectionality in tech is close to impossible. And why does this matter, other than the obvious? As Timnit will uncover and reveal, computers are not just magical machines. They do what you tell them to do, meaning they reflect the values of their creators, and unchecked, perpetuate the inequities that we have in society. Timnit will fully step into her role as a scientist when she removes the barrier between her work and her identity. She will facilitate dialogue where humanity and ethics are woven into the evolution of our technology. I'm your host, Tracy Ellis Ross, and this is I Am America, where we meet people who are redefining their own identity, the idea of community, and the possibility of our country. These stories are beautiful, heavy, and light, and they allow us to reimagine and reframe what we know about this country. Today's story is produced by Nicole Hill and Siona Petros, and this is Timnit Gebru.
In 2001, if Timnit were to share her story with her colleagues and her classmates, she would have told it in a fairly straightforward way. She'd immigrated to the U.S. in 1999 from Ethiopia and then settled in Boston with her family as a teenager. She finished high school and was accepted to Stanford University, where she studied electrical engineering. And then by her senior year, she'd won an internship that later turned into a full-time engineering job.
I started working at Apple in the audio team with a lot of other people who are interested in music and were also engineers. And then I sort of started moving into figuring out how to make devices. So, for instance, figuring out how to make more efficient memory for your computer.
At Apple, Timnit thrived. People liked her and saw her as a rising star whose methods met the scientific standard of their field, one in particular.
So forever, the view from nowhere says that you learn about, science as something that's from no one's point of view, right? Engineering is an objective truth that's out there, and people's values are not embedded in it. People's points of views are not embedded in it. A lot of times, my work was very disconnected from, quote unquote, the real world societal impacts. Like I kind of compartmentalized all of those things. So I didn't think, how are tech companies impacting the world negatively? How am I going to change the world or whatever? I was thinking about, this is interesting. This other thing is interesting, super cool.
Given the importance of objectivity to her field, when Timnit was at work, she did her best to leave behind any parts of herself that might come across as biased.
I always was very adamant that I wanted to be known as the scientist who happens to be Black rather than the Black scientist, or the Black woman scientist, something like that. I wanted to be known for a specific work, like the same way they would, know somebody who's not a Black woman.
But outside of work, Timnit's identity as a Black woman and a scientist were very much connected.
I was just talking to my cousin the other day because we were looking at a bunch of photos of all of us together. It was like, I think it was New Year, and it was all my cousins, not all of them, but, some of my cousins and my aunts and uncles, and we're just hanging out and we're dancing. The little kids are all dancing. That was the photo. And my cousin and I were saying how lucky we were to have this childhood because our families did such a good job of giving us those moments and those times regardless of what else was happening.
Timnit grew up in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in a loving family of electrical engineers and achievers with high expectations of her.
I was expected by my entire family and relatives to be like top of my class. And if I wasn't top of my class, they was like, whatever, like third. I'm like, what? Third is great. What are you talking about? What's your problem? Everybody expected me to really, really excel.
And so she does.
Ever since I was a little girl, I apparently said, when people said, what do you want to be? I apparently said scientist. And I don't even know how I knew what scientist does or who scientists were. But I think I liked the general kind of thing about figuring things out. But I also liked learning, and I was very much a nerd. And it's just like, don't even understand how I was like so much of a nerd.
Timnit remains at the top of her class throughout her younger years and into her teens.
So in 1998, there was a war between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Eritrea was a newly independent country north of Ethiopia. And during that war, people of Eritrean descent were being deported from Ethiopia. And so I am someone of Eritrean descent. And so within a few months, we fled because many of our family members were being deported. So I then spent 1 year in Ireland because I couldn't get a visa to come to the U.S. And then I came to the States when I was 16.
Once in the U.S., Timnit and her family settle in Boston, Massachusetts. Timnit gets enrolled in high school and prepares to excel, like she always had.
I was in honors physics, and the next year I wanted to take advanced AP physics. And my physics teacher kept on being like, don't you think AP physics is going to be too hard for you? Don't you think it's going to be too difficult for you? And I'm like, so confused. And I was just like, what? But if it's too difficult for me, then who would it be easy for then? Because everybody's in this class. I have a higher grade than all of them. So I don't know what you're talking about. And my mom tried to explain it to me. So I'd ask her, like, why is he saying these things, And she'd say, it's because you're Black or it's because you're African. They don't even think, you can do this stuff. And that was the first time I had experienced something like that. When I was growing up in Ethiopia, I sort of thought about racism in the U.S. I knew it existed, but I was not prepared at all for the way it was going to happen. I just was completely shocked because a lot of whatever I experienced before, a lot of it is very direct. People just say things directly, even if it's horrible. Or you have to leave your country, but it's direct,
But in America, teachers seemed to be trying to help her when they suggested that she not dream too big or reach too high or risk disappointment. And Timnit could not understand why they would treat her this way unless, of course, they knew something that she didn't. Their doubts and subtle discouragements start to chip away at Timnit's confidence, and it makes her wonder if she'd ever really had a shot at becoming a scientist in the first place.
I remember thinking when I was in high school, how do people get through this growing up in the United States? Because I could tell that the teachers had such low expectations of Black students in the high school. And that manifested itself in many ways. And it wasn't just me. I was just an example because I was fighting back. I was fighting with them to take AP classes, they would say, no, you can't do that. I wanted to take AP English, you can't do that, And I would say, why? And I had to fight tooth and nail. My mom would come to the school. We would meet with the vice principal and this and that. My teachers from Ireland wrote letters. So that whole time I was thinking about, how do people who grow up here survive? How are they even expected to get anywhere? Even I started believing that I wasn't going to get into college. I started believing that, okay, what are my alternatives if I can't even get to any colleges, right? Because you start losing perspective if that's the only thing you're hearing.
But since her sisters had gone to college in the U.S., she knew it was possible. She went to a website on her own and found a list of schools with engineering and music programs, her dual passions. And then she applied to all of them. She was genuinely shocked when she received an acceptance letter to, among other places, Stanford University. So by 2008, when she wasn't finishing out her senior year at Stanford or working at Apple, she was canvassing for then presidential candidate Barack Obama, traveling out of state and even dropping a class to devote more time to campaigning. But her background and all these other activities were things that she was very intentionally keeping to herself.
For the longest time, I had separated out my technical work, my engineering work, my research, etc., from my advocacy. And so I didn't want those two things to be conflated.
Timnit was one of very few Black people in her classes and at work. By now, she knew that people were expecting less of her, and that made her feel frustrated and isolated and fiercely determined to prove them wrong. Changing up your eyewear is such a great way to change up your style, but that can get very pricey very quickly. That's where Pair Eyewear comes in. With Pair, you can get prescription, blue light, or sunglasses as base frames, and then change the top frames in a snap. Literally. They have hundreds of magnetic top frames to choose from. I have these all-black Pair sunglasses, and when I'm in the mood, I snap on a new top frame, and then all of a sudden, I have these tortoiseshell sunglasses. Same with my blue light glasses. The base frames are tortoiseshell. I mean, I clearly have a preference, but I can easily switch things up by snapping on a new magnetic top frame like Ruby Sparkle, or Navy Blue Polka Dots, or Charlie Brown Plaid. There are hundreds of top frame styles to choose from, and they start at just $25, so you can build a collection that's unique to you. The base frames are also budget-friendly, with styles from classic to cat eye, and they start at just $60, including prescription. Pair knows that vision is essential, so for every pair you buy, Pair provides glasses to a child in need. So get glasses that stay as fresh as your unique style with Pair. Go to paireyewear.com/America for 15% off your first purchase. That's Pair, PAIR, eyewear.com/America. By 2011, Timnit had enrolled in a PhD program at Stanford and was making her way into the burgeoning field of computer vision, which is a type of artificial intelligence.
The term AI is something that has evolved to mean many different things over the years. For me, as I see it, and other people might define it differently, it's a field that attempts to get machines to do something other than what's purely programmed into them at the onset. So for instance, if you have a camera, the camera can take pictures and you can look at the pictures and determine who's in that picture. But without what we call AI, that's the end of what the camera can do. But for instance, you can program it to identify that there is grass in the picture or trees or something like that. And that is a subset of artificial intelligence called computer vision. For me, that's how I view it. However, there are other people in the field that describe the systems as having some sort of intelligence and talk about these things as if they're magical machines that are doing things on their own rather than reflecting the values of the creators and reflecting the issues that we have in society. And what this hype does is it makes people think that there are things out there that are making decisions on their own rather than being programmed by creators, by corporations, and other entities. And I'm not in that camp. For me, I see AI as a tool to be used by human beings for specific purposes.
But Timnit's colleagues didn't really share her point of view, or her lived experiences for that matter. She was one of the only Black people at work and at school. And the differences in perspectives that she is starting to notice more and more make her feel increasingly isolated. In 2015, Timnit attends a high-profile industry conference. Being there is a huge deal, in part because it's the largest AI-focused event in the field. Leaders and programmers and visionaries at Apple and Google and IBM and other tech companies shared insights into the future of machine learning there. That year, Timnit is one of over 3,000 people in attendance.
One of the most important things at these conferences is networking, meeting other people in the field, learning about their work. So there are papers that are peer-reviewed by other academics that are accepted to this conference, and then there are also workshops that are based on different themes. If you're interested in a specific theme, you can go to a specific workshop, and their talks and other, people's works would be based on that theme.
There are very few Black people in attendance, let alone leading these workshops, and Timnit already knows most of them. In addition to the workshops and networking, this conference is also where recent AI-related events are discussed and big announcements are made.
There was an incident where Google Photos was tagging Black people as gorillas. And this company called OpenAI was supposed to be a nonprofit that was going to save humanity from AI. All these corporations are controlling it, whereas now we need to create a nonprofit. It was like 8 white guys, 1 Asian woman, 1 white woman, bankrolled by the billionaires like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. And I was so irritated that it was billed as, these white guys are going to save humanity, the billionaires who got us here into this mess, right?
Timnit was very skeptical about this new organization's capacity to take on these issues, and even more skeptical that the solutions to the emerging challenges with AI would come from this collection of people, especially given what she was seeing at this conference.
I was harassed and all sorts of things. It's also was not a pleasant place to be for a woman, let alone a Black woman, right? And the conference's name was NIPS, N-I-P-S. And if you made an accident and went to nips.com, still, if you go to nips.com, it's probably a porn site, I believe. But it's nips.cc was what it was. And so now the name has changed to NIRIPS. But even that name change was a whole contentious thing. People got death threats for suggesting the name change and things like that.
By the following year in her personal life, Timnit was volunteering with a coding program for young people back in Ethiopia, helping them to navigate application fees and visa issues as they applied to science, technology, engineering, and math college programs overseas. Her PhD advisors suggest that she consider exploring ways to blend her personal passions with her profession. But doing that seems like it would totally conflict with the view from nowhere. So Timnit is hesitant. But then in 2016, she starts to reconsider.
When I met Joy Buamini, she started raising awareness about how the various open source computer vision models, face detection systems were not detecting her face unless she was wearing a white mask, right? They were detecting her roommate's face, but not her face. And then there was a 2016 ProPublica article that talked about a software, a model that purported to determine someone's likelihood of committing a crime again. And this model is used by judges to set bail, to sentencing, etc. And it was much more likely to say that Black people are more likely to commit a crime again, right? And so that was shocking to me because I didn't know It was all fun and games when I was in my researching class. I didn't know that these things were actually being used and in such a consequential way.
Timnit could not ignore the bias in these programs or the ways that they reflected the larger bias in society.
And I also had my own experiences of being a Black person and a Black woman in the United States. And I had my own experiences of seeing who designs such systems, because those are the people I was going to school with.
She remembers talking to a classmate who went on to become a powerful person in the tech industry about an encounter she'd had with the police. She told them about a time when she and a friend were in trouble and called the police for help.
I called the police because my friend and I were attacked to help my friend, and the police ended up putting handcuffs on my friend. And the person was like, oh, she must have been acting crazy, because the thought of racism and police doing this to people is just crazy for them. And they're the ones now designing these systems in power, figuring out what research questions are important, whose voice should be heard, making lots of money. So it was a combination of all of those things, right? A realization that these things were interrelated and that technology is political. And that was a turning point for me to say, oh my God, I need to start working on actually understanding these harms and mitigating them.
Many of us learned a second language in high school or college, but it didn't stick. I took years and years of Spanish, but I still get nervous whenever I have to speak it. I got books and tried to brush up on what I've learned, but it's hard to do it on your own. But now, thanks to Babel, I have a way to improve my language skills that's been proven effective, and it's enjoyable, and it's easy to do. Babel, the language learning app that sold more than 10 million subscriptions, offers 15-minute lessons, and that makes it the perfect way to learn a new language on the go. Whether you'll be traveling abroad, wanting to connect in a deeper way with family and loved ones, or you just have some free time, Babel teaches language lessons that you will actually use in the real world. Lessons that were created by over 100 language experts using teaching methods that have been scientifically proven to be effective. With Babel, you can choose from 14 different languages, including French, Italian, German, and Spanish. My Babel lessons have helped me to be more comfortable and confident with my Spanish, and have helped me with the basics in a few other languages as well. Plus, Babel's speech recognition technology helps you to improve your pronunciation, and in addition to lessons, you can access podcasts, games, videos, stories, and even live classes. And it comes with a 20-day money-back guarantee. Start your new language learning journey today with Babel. Right now, get up to 55% off your subscription when you go to babbel.com/America. That's babbel.com/America for up to 55% off your subscription. Babel, language for life.
Hi, I'm Tracy Ellis Ross. It was a long road to understanding and loving my natural hair. I created Pattern Beauty for all of us to unleash our best curls in our own bathrooms. From wash day to styling and everything in between, Pattern promises to keep your curls, coils, and tight textures juicy and joyful. Give us a try and get 15% off now with the code podcast15 on patternbeauty.com. Here's to loving our hair.
By 2016, Timnit had come to realize that the view from nowhere couldn't exist. Scientists have perspectives that were powering new technologies that were having an impact on the world. And so she starts learning more about the systems that AI technology was being programmed to enhance.
Starting from what problems are considered important. Just the framing itself, I was reading, some articles by abolitionists who are talking about, for instance, crime. What's considered a crime? Oh, if you steal something from a store, that's a crime. But wage theft by companies is not a crime. And then I started getting acquainted with all this large body of work, like especially Black women who've been working on surveillance set, like Simone Brown or Ruha Benjamin or Safiya Noble, who wrote Algorithms of Oppression, And so like these other disciplines, the people who have been thinking about this for such a long time. And so I started to learn from them and start to inform my work.
Timnit wants to discuss what she's learning and her growing concerns around algorithmic bias with other Black people in her field. So she starts imagining a group that she names Black in AI that would bring Black AI professionals together. They could discuss these issues and share their work and just commiserate. She thinks that she can make this group happen, but she needs a way to signal to the other Black people in AI that, she's assembling them. At first, she thinks about going the comedic route.
I was thinking about making these videos where we would all have meetings of the Black and AI people, but it would just be me though, right? And maybe I would have different hairstyles to make it look like different people, just a parody, just to show the extent of the problem.
But she settles for something a little less theatrical.
I emailed a bunch of all the Black people I had met at that time, which was 4 or something, whether it's at the conferences or elsewhere.
And they start sharing concerns and discussing ways to support one another and their work. In 2016, Timnit returns to the industry conference she'd first attended the year before, NeurIPS. She was concerned about the harassment she'd faced there and the inappropriate behavior and the lack of diversity in the room and the amount of trust being placed in AI. And now she was also thinking about the impact that all these issues combined were having on the world outside of the event.
The attendance has exploded. It's miles and miles of people. And you don't see a Black person, period. And it's international, right? It's not limited to the US or some other country. It's worldwide. And now a lot of money is pouring into this space. And I have learned about this, the uses of these systems. And I know what the people I work with think. And so when I attended this conference, these were all the things that were in my head. And I think that if I could summarize how I felt, it was more like a state of panic. I felt like I was panicking.
This tech was going out into the world and impacting people's lives, and it felt like no one was talking about the bias in the programmers that was making its way into the algorithms. She didn't know what else to do. And so Timnit went on Facebook and she wrote a post about her concerns, saying that, quote, "I'm not worried about machines taking over the world. I'm worried about groupthink, insularity, and arrogance in the AI community. If many people are actively excluded from its creation, this technology will benefit a few while harming a great many."
It was just a rant. But that Facebook post was shared by a whole bunch of people. And then there were people who felt the same and said, yeah, I feel the same. What are we doing? Kind of thing, More people kind of contacted me, and the email list I had kept on growing. And we eventually said, let's create a Google group and a Facebook group. And that's how Black in AI grew out of this email list.
Timnit had some real momentum behind her now. She was able to start conversations with other Black AI professionals, and they decide that one of the first things they want is to see more Black people attending the NeurIPS conference and leading workshops and benefiting from the experiences there the way that others in their field had.
We wanted to have people learn how to, either give them more exposure, give their work more exposure to their wider community, or some of them might be learning how to write academic papers, and they might just being at the conference is a big deal because they get to network with other people. That's a lot of people get internships like that. They get collaborators. You might see a keynote that someone gives and you might really like their work. So you might invite them to other events to give them more exposure.
Timnit plans a Black in AI workshop at the NeurIPS conference that will showcase the works of Black AI professionals and researchers. Her goal is to have 100 Black AI professionals from around the world attend. To do that, she has to navigate financing and visa issues, both of which prove to be incredibly challenging. But ultimately, she's able to bring 300 Black AI professionals to the 2017 conference and her Black in AI workshop.
We had never seen a room full of Black people at this conference before. And we were all like, we need to take pictures of this. This is ridiculous. Like, there's a whole room, of like 300 people, most of whom are Black. And there are other people, of course, in the community who want to see this work because it's great, right? And so then we had keynotes by different people. So we had, for instance, Danielle Belgrave, who talked about, AI in healthcare and how it's used. We had Shiro Amena. Actually, he was studying conservation, bird migration patterns, etc. That tells you a lot about climate change using AI. And there were just such a diverse group of people from all over the world, right, who were speaking. And so people got to learn about their work. We got to know about each other. And so many seeds were planted there. For instance, people started new collaborations. People would get internships or scholarships or other job opportunities, right? So it's just a lot happening, a lot of networking, a lot of learning about different things you might be interested in, different people's works, a lot of getting opportunities. This wasn't hitting at the power structure yet. It was bringing people to the table. But then there is bringing people there to be present. Then there is the building an ecosystem of people who have power, marginalized groups. So for instance, after Black in AI came queer in AI, Latinx in AI, disabilities in AI, indigenous in AI. And so all of those groups were doing similar things. And then after that is coordinating with each other and building power. And then after that is pushing back against the systemic issues. You see what I mean?
Black in AI now boasts 3,000 members from around the world and has contributed to there being 40 times more Black participation in major AI conferences. Timnit went on to work for Microsoft and then Google. She co-authored a paper arguing that Google was rushing to create technology aimed at understanding and reproducing human language without considering the biases embedded in their system. Shortly after its release, she's fired, and believes it's because of this paper, although Google disputes that. Since then, Timnit has gone on to become one of the field's most prominent AI ethicists and speakers on algorithmic bias. She founded the Distributed AI Research Institute, or DARE for short, and the organization's mission statement reads, "AI is not inevitable. Its harms are preventable, and when its production and deployment include diverse perspectives and deliberate processes, it can be beneficial. Our research reflects our lived experiences and centers our communities."
At some point, I started to, I think a few years ago, I was like, screw it, I don't care. The fact that I wanted to be known as the scientist who happens to be Black, it was more like, okay, I need to play by a specific set of paradigms and rules. And so once I kind of started learning a lot more from these other disciplines, I felt like, oh, wow, actually, I should bring my whole self into this work. And also, I should focus on, how not to harm my own community and how to actually think about benefiting my community. And that means completely removing the quote unquote view from nowhere, right? And going the opposite direction. My name is Timnit Gebru, and I am founder and executive director of the Distributed AI Research Institute, which is DARE for short.
I'm blown away by the realization that intersectionality can even be woven into technology, and that someone can be courageous enough to imagine solutions that change the course of what is believed to be inevitable. The fact that AI is not inevitable, that its harms are preventable, and that it can be beneficial is exciting. Timnit has illuminated the fact that technology is a reflection of the people who make it, clarifying that science does have a point of view. Science has real-world societal impacts, and we have to be deliberate and intentional about how we want it to be used. There is a need and urgency for equal representation in all spaces, and in areas of innovation and growth, like in AI, a particular kind of care is required if we don't want it to be harmful. Timnit's willingness to connect her scientific knowledge with her lived experience informed an ethical direction to her work, benefiting society at large. Her boldness at challenging and holding powerful companies to ethical standards has created a blueprint. Did you assume that AI was inevitable? Are you aware of the ways AI is part of your daily life? Are there spaces in your world where the technology around you is not serving you and doesn't represent you or doesn't see you? And do we have to accept that technology as a given? I'm Tracy Ellis Ross, and I hope you enjoyed meeting Timnit Gebru as much as I did.
I Am America is a co-production of Dear Media and Joy Mill Entertainment. Executive producer, creator, and co-writer is Tracy Ellis Ross. Executive producer, showrunner, and writer is Me Nicole Hill. Executive producer and co-writer is Adriana Ambrose on behalf of Joy Mill Entertainment. Managing producer is Rosalie Atkinson on behalf of Dear Media. Producing and reporting by Siona Petros. Sound design and engineering by Mitra Kaboli. Our theme song, Strum, is composed by Jesse Montgomery. Story editing by Martina Abrams-Ilunga. Fact-checking by Serena Solin. Production assistance by Daniel Gonzalez. Executive producers are Brian Dobbins on behalf of Artists First, Jeff Berman and Brett Boutier on behalf of Magnet Companies, and Jocelyn Falk, Paige Port, and Michael Bostic on behalf of Dear Media.